Chromosomes. Little strands of nucleic acids and proteins are the fundamental genetic instructions that tell us who we are at birth. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, but each year in the United States, about 6,000 people are born with an extra chromosome, making them a person with Down syndrome. If you've ever encountered someone with Down syndrome, you know that they are some of the kindest, most joyful people you will ever meet. They truly have something extra. My name is Lisa Nichols, and I have spent the last 24 years as both the CEO of Technology Partners and as the mother to Allie. Allie has something extra in every sense of the word. I have been blessed to be by her side as she impacts everyone she meets. Through these two important roles as CEO and mother to Allie, I have witnessed countless life lessons that have fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. While you may not have an extra chromosome, every leader has something extra that defines who you are. Join me as I explore the something extra in leaders from all walks of life and discover how that difference in each of them has made a difference in their companies, their families, their communities, and in themselves. I am thrilled to have Jennifer Belmont Jennings on the show today. Jennifer is a former attorney and a wealth advisor for Hightower Wealth Advisors in St. Louis. If you like this episode today, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave us a 5-star rating. Jennifer, girl, I am so excited about our conversation. We are going to have so much fun in this conversation. We have a lot to talk about. So you and I, we're connected a couple different ways. For one thing, we both love the Fathers and Family Support Center. You sit on the board, right?
Yes, I do. I love it. It's a wonderful organization.
Your parents own Belmont Rentals, which some of our listeners may know of. If you don't know about them, make sure you check them out. I've read a little bit about your parents' business and, they're even using technology in their business, with the CAD, and they say they can show you what your event's going to look like before they ever lay down a napkin. But I want to talk a little bit about how you grew up. And I know you did work in your parents' business a little bit, right?
If you see me today, there's an occasion that I might be helping take down a party or put one up for them. I grew up, was put to work at a very young age. My dad used to have us crawl under tables in public places to make sure they were his tables. It used to be Admiral Party and Tent Rentals before it was Belmont Party Rentals. But yes, I can stack chairs just as well as anybody.
But you know what? Those lessons are so awesome, aren't they, to learn as a child? Hard work, but also that it takes everybody, it takes a team, to pull these things off. But I know a little bit of something else about you that I read, because what you really wanted to do, you wanted to be a news analyst, an actress, and a lawyer. So I didn't know that about you. You wanted to be an actress when you were growing up.
I loved theater. I did theater. I always have a dream of even being in the Muni. I've joked with my husband, how much money do you think we'd have to donate one day for me to just say, can you just give me a little spot in the background singing and dancing? I might need some singing lessons, but no, I loved it. And anyone who knows me knows that I can turn the most boring thing into a really animated story. So it fits with it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you're getting a little bit of an outlet with that now with your writing, your creativity, and we'll talk about that. But, you are such an accomplished professional. You have a JD, an MA, and a BA. You graduated magna cum laude from Washington University, which people in St. Louis knows is a fantastic university. But, you did go on to get your law degree. Tell me about that experience. And then what I really want to start talking about is that you made a pivot.
I'd always wanted to go to law school. I don't even remember what put that thought in my mind. I think at a very young age, I was always, having conversations with adults. I always like to argue my point and have deep conversations. And I was always an advocate, I think, for people. I didn't like to see people being picked on. And I think it was very easy for me to advocate for other people. When I graduated college, I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do. I kind of had to, I guess, quote unquote, find myself a little bit. I got a master's degree, thought I might like to teach because I love teaching. And then I decided, nope, I'm going to law school. This is what I want to do. I literally called WashU and SLU up in June and said, I'm going to take the LSAT in a couple of weeks. Do you have any spots? And they said, nope. They said I could get on the wait list probably. And I got a phone call from both schools on the same day, 2 months later, that there was a spot for me. And, it was kind of hard to choose, but my heart had been at Wash U. I'd already been there and loved it. And both were great schools. And so I decided to go to Wash U, and I did that, was excited, borrowed a lot of money without really understanding what I was doing. Then halfway through, the financial crisis hit. They were like, congratulations, none of you all are going to have jobs. And sorry, you just borrowed an obscene amount of money. Good luck. Thus began a bunch of things I never envisioned doing. I wasn't being called to be a news analyst on any cable news shows right out of law school. I was helping my dad with party rental, stuff to supplement my income. And there's a lot of different steps that I took to get me to where I was today. And some were really hard times, and I wouldn't be here without all of them.
And what I really want our listeners to understand is, you may start one way. It's okay though, to do that. So you actually I think you got your start at Wells Fargo. Is that right?
And yes, in advising. I did practice law before that. I did some political research, and then I practiced law for a little bit, did estate planning and probate and family law. And the family law was just draining. The system is broken. I don't think anybody could disagree. I thought I could fix it. I realized this is not going to happen. The stress is through the roof. It was just a lot. And so I had to start thinking outside of the box a little bit, which was hard because you have moments where you feel like a failure, like, well, I just went to law school. I spent all this money. If I'm not practicing law, who am I? I ended up, a friend of mine, her dad was at Wells Fargo, and I thought maybe he knows somebody in the corporate downtown office. I could get into compliance, something in house. And he threw out the idea that I might be a good fit with my estate planning background in this industry. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to sell anything. I don't want people to avoid me at cocktail parties thinking I'm going to be like, hey, come buy my product, or like try to get your money. And he was like, nope, you don't have to do that. I have an established practice. It's a succession plan. And so that's where I got my start. But I didn't start out getting to be an advisor. I actually went from having my own office and having an assistant to moving and being in a cubicle and basically being the assistant for a while until I got my licenses and could shift over. So that was challenging for me. It was a really good learning experience, but definitely it was one of those pride moments where I had to say, okay, but this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do for my family.
Right. Well, sometimes you have to take a step back, I think, to move forward too, because you were entering into a completely different industry. But now look at you today. So now you went to work for the current company that you're with, which was Archer Wealth. And tell us that story. How did that all come about?
So once I was working as an advisor, it became clear for a couple of reasons that I wasn't going to have a lot of the growth that I really needed where I was. I started looking for a new job, and I'm not going to lie, I had trouble finding the right job. I was looking back at law firms again. I was talking to trust companies. I was talking to financial firms, and I would get a lot of the like, oh, we can't hire you just yet. I joke that they were willing to pay me XY. It's not even worth like giving the extra Z in there because the money was so bad. It was like an XY salary, not XYZ. And I was feeling really defeated for a time period because I felt like I had all this offer. What was going on? Why couldn't I find a job? I had some non-Pollyanna attitude moments. But what was interesting that was happening during that time is that a lot of people, if they couldn't hire me or it wasn't the right time, they would pass my name along to somebody else and they'd make an introduction. They'd say, I think you need to talk to this firm or this person. Before I knew it, after I had like an attitude shift, I kind of had to have one of those moments where I was like, okay, I'm doing everything I can. What's the one thing I can control? My attitude. So I got to come here every day, show up with a smile on my face, learn what I can, take care of my clients, and something's going to happen. It's just not the right time. But through all of that, Barbara Archer, who had recently merged with Carol Rogers at Hightower Advisors, she'd been hearing my name all over town. I mean, because everybody in St. Louis knew I was looking for a job. And so she reached out to a mutual friend. And before I knew it, I'm sitting in their office, literally like that day, maybe. And I had a soft offer. I mean, it was unreal. But for all of that, the no's and the not yets, I've joked and I've said this before. I was like Cousin Eddie holding out for management in the vacation movies because I didn't want to just leave for anything. I wasn't going to leave just to leave.
Right.
And it turned out to be 100% perfect for me. It's like a hybrid between my law practice and the financial. It's not, I'm not practicing law and giving legal advice. I always have those disclaimers. This is not legal advice, check with your lawyer. But it was incredible. And I joined women who've just paved the way in this industry for other women to be part of it. So
Yeah.
it all kind of worked out, even though at the time I couldn't see it. And I felt like there were days that I just didn't think I could withstand much more.
So, okay, Jennifer, let's unpack this a little bit because, there are likely maybe some listeners out there that feel exactly the way you felt. They've got the pedigree, they've got the experience, they're doing all the right things, and it's just not hitting. So, number one, what I heard is you told everybody, I'm looking. All 2.5 million people in St. Louis knew that Jennifer Belmont Jennings was looking. So that's the first thing. I mean, I would say to the listeners, people cannot read your mind. People, I think, innately want to help. But, here's the thing. You have to get out there and tell people what is it that you need. So that's the first thing. Now I would say network, network, network. And people need to keep up their networks. Secondly, you did acknowledge the feelings. I mean, you have those feelings of defeat, but how personally did you keep putting one foot in front of the other, even in the face of this daily rejection, I guess, if you will?
Sometimes I didn't put one foot in front of the other. Sometimes I just felt like I was stumbling. I felt bad about myself. And I know that's not something, it doesn't make me look super successful to say, like, I felt bad about myself. But anybody who says they don't have those moments is a liar.
That's right. I agree.
We all do. I mean, ask me how my LinkedIn post is doing today. I didn't think it was that great. And so I was feeling bad about myself before this podcast. And then I have to remind myself, like, okay, just stop. This is noise. There's so much noise out there. There's so much perceived perfection on social media, which is, it's not true. Nobody has a perfect life. Nobody's perfect. You can only do what you can do. If you are showing up every day and attempting to put your best foot forward and trying to make the most of the moment that you're in, I feel reasonably comfortable saying that at some point something will work out. It doesn't always work out the way we want it to or we envisioned it. I never would have believed I'm doing what I do today if you'd asked me when I started law school. I mean, I thought I was going to go like, oh, well, I'll get a job at a big law firm and then I might be a Supreme Court justice. I mean, I never would have pictured this, but everything I did, even when I was serving in a more administrative role, I know you referenced step back, but when you really look at it, it's like, it was like a step out as opposed to back. It was learning a different side of this business, understanding all the stuff that goes on in the background when I'm now in the front, knowing what goes on back there and how vital that role is to the success of any business, I think makes me better at my job than I would have been had I just started out.
I could not agree more. So sometimes you're not putting one step in front of the other, and it's okay to acknowledge that. And you know what? I want to talk more about Hightower Wealth, and I want to talk about what you're specifically doing for women. But let's talk just a minute about social media. You and I have talked about this a lot, Jennifer, about social media. And it's this idea. I mean, people look perfect in many ways and they look like they have the perfect lives, but we all know that every one of us has stuff and stuff that looks sloppy and is not good, right? And I love your vulnerability because you are so great on social media. And we'll talk about wealthy women and what you're doing there. But I told you before we started, one of my favorite posts that you did was about your grandfather. I love the social media aspect of just seeing the humanness. And I see that in you, Jennifer. That's what you're putting out there. So tell me a little bit. I don't want to read this post, but tell me a little bit about that post. I just loved it so much.
Well, I saw a lot of people were starting to head to law school and starting law school. And a friend of mine from social media, she had posted something, a nod to her school. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. I'll throw on my wash you sweatshirt and do something. And I took a picture in front of my grandfather's chair. He went to the dental school at Wash U, and he had started out life wanting to be a Greyhound bus driver. He grew up Depression era trucking business that went under his parents' trucking business in the Depression, had to move to his grandparents' farm, and somehow got this idea for dental school. And he had a tough road too. And then the war broke out and he thought, well, I guess I'm not going to dental school, but he enlisted and everything. And all of a sudden the bus just dropped him off at the front door at Wash U and was like, we need dentists. You're going to dental school. And so that was a bit of surprise. The school held a special place for me just because it was a place my grandfather had gone, even though they closed the dental school. I think his life didn't always turn out the way that he had envisioned, and mine didn't either. And so, what I wanted to encourage a lot of the young students going in is that don't get this idea in your head that it's a big law. That's like the big fancy firms or nothing. That if unless you run yourself into the ground in your mental health and you're exhausted and snag one of those big fancy jobs, there's this mentality that you're never going to be successful without that. And it's not true. And yes, I did not have a great salary for several years. There's no question about that. But I got to a place that I love where I have a platform where I am able to speak into people's lives and help women and help people with their money that I may not have had if I was just like locked up in some office downtown having to get my billable hours.
Right.
And so
right.
it can be overwhelming if you're not, one of the top couple people in your class and you don't get that coveted clerkship or whatever. You just feel like it's the end of the world. It is not the end of the world. You have to choose to not let it be, though. You have a responsibility in that too.
But it's such great advice, just helping others. I mean, that's your heart anyway. And we'll talk about more about that. But you say, remember, every step in your career path is important, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. There is always an opportunity to learn and grow, even if your job circumstances are less than ideal at some point. Great career advice, Jennifer. I loved it. Well, we need to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Jennifer Belmont Jennings.
Are you an IT executive with years of experience? Are you energized when you empower others? If I've piqued your interest thus far, you may be a great mentor for the TechLX program in St. Louis. TechLX prepares rising IT leaders to tackle today's challenges and prepare for tomorrow's demanding roles by pairing them with senior IT executives like yourself. Mentors receive coaching from technology partners and will be invited to all TechLX networking events featuring outstanding speakers of the IT industry. To apply, visit tpi.co/TLX.
So welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with Jennifer Belmont Jennings. So Jennifer, I really want to dive into this now. So you are with Hightower Wealth, and I know your goal, it is empower women to take a seat at the table in terms of their own finances. And then we'll talk about a few other things. But why do you think women lack the confidence to even talk about money? And it's such an important subject because we know that unfortunately there's life interruptions. There can be divorce, there can be death. And, women need to know what's going on in terms of their finances.
I think you cannot ignore the obvious that women were excluded from this for quite some time. I mean, it's not a secret that the past things were different. Things are getting better. We still have work to do, but this was a quote unquote man's world. Men handled the money. Women handled everything else that was going on at home.
Yes.
So I think that you have a long history of that, and you still have that generation is still here where that was the norm for them. I think that because of just the pervasive problem of some inherent sexism that's still around, again, I don't want to diminish the progress that's been made, but it still exists. I think women are not generally steered into that conversation, and they don't believe they're capable because they hear like, we're not as good at math, or they were told they weren't as good at math. And a lot of them, they don't have the confidence. They think that their spouses are better equipped. And I'm always like, well, wait, like, where did he learn how to do that? Because you're not just born with the knowledge of estate and tax planning and knowing marginal tax rates. I think a lot of women also, because they're still disproportionately handling a lot of stuff that's at home, even women who are working outside the home, the burden is still falling on them. Thankfully, that's not in my family. I'm married to a saint. They don't have time and they don't want to deal with it. Working with women who are divorced, who are widowed, women outlive men. The first time you want to figure out what's going on with your money is not when you're trying to deal with the emotional impact of a divorce or your spouse passing away. So at some point or another, I've read one statistic that's 8 out of 10 women will be on their own at some point having to do this. That is not the time you want to learn. The goal is not to have you become day traders. I don't sit and day trade. It's knowing what you have, why you have it, what it's doing for you, and being a part of the conversation and knowing that you belong there, that it's okay if you don't know everything. So I really don't want this to be overwhelming. And I want women to be part of the conversation because this is about them. It's about their money. I mean, there are hardly any things more important because it's the stuff that puts the roof over your head, that feeds your family, that allows you to, not have to worry if you get high medical bills. What are you going to do? So that has become a passion for me, especially I think some of my practice in divorce law really highlighted that. I'd see women who were like, this is the first time they're going to have to work. And it's like, sorry, you're getting a job. The judge is going to expect you to earn some income. So I want to take the pressure off and let this be a more comfortable, casual conversation as we go along in life so that when that time comes, you're not overwhelmed and having a complete panic because you don't understand any of this.
It's so important. And to your point, the time to start is not when that event happens. So let's talk about this a little bit because women, I know in our industry, I had our RNC pull 13 to 17% of our applicants were female. And I know like in the financial world, I've read about 50% of the workforce is women, but less than 20% actually make it to the top spot or to the C-suite. What do you think we need to do to change that and to get more equity there?
Well, first, I think dispel the notion that just because you go into finance, it means you have to have passed Calculus 3. I'm not building bridges that people need to drive over. Yes, there are some very highly focused math, equation driven areas that you can go into being an analyst. And if you love math, that's great. I'm not a hardcore, I want to sit and just be an analyst and like type in numbers all day long. That is not what would excite me. I prefer more of the life math. And so I think there's this fear. People say, well, I don't like math or I don't know how to do it. But it's like, we're not talking calculus here. So I barely do more than algebra. But I think there's a lot to offer in the financial field that's not quite so hardcore because even men, it's not like every man in the world is excited about doing the really minute little data points either.
Right.
So there are a lot of things to do in the financial world that can get you out front, that you can be client facing, that you can be doing investment management and financial planning. And I think don't let the math scare you.
So tell me this, and then I want to talk about your Wealthy Women Wednesdays that you're doing social media wise. But for our listeners, define wealth for me because people often think you're talking about your money, but you really take a holistic approach.
Right. And I think about it in terms of abundance, but it's an abundance of numerous things. So our firm, the tagline is Wealth Rebalance, and it spells wealth, WELL-TH, which they did that like right before the pandemic. And so at first I remember being kind of like, oh, okay, that's an interesting take. And then the pandemic hit and everything in the world changed. And it was like they had a crystal ball because that is 100% on. So there are so many things that come in. It's thinking about your health. It's like your emotional well-being. Are you getting enough physical exercise? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you being too hard on yourself? Give yourself a break. Are you involved in your finances? Are you excited about saving for retirement? Are you making healthy decisions in every area of your life? And so it's not just about getting however many millions on the balance sheet, because guess what? I could have $10 million in my bank account. And if I am burned out, defeated, overworked, unhealthy, not exercising, I'm not going to enjoy the $10 million.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I think we've got to focus on everything comprehensively and have all the puzzle pieces there to really get to the point where you feel wealthy, like the WELL.
Exactly. Well, Jennifer, that's a perfect segue because, as you were talking, I was thinking, you want to be wealthy in your relationships. So for you, you're balancing a lot of things. A wonderful husband. You've got a little boy, Liam. I know this last year was tough. I remember talking to you at one time and you're like, how do you do this? Oh my goodness. I got to homeschool Liam and I've got a job and Brent has a job. How do you keep it all together, Jennifer?
I don't always.
Right.
I even posted a video on Instagram a couple of weeks ago of me juggling as a metaphor. Like I tried to juggle Clementine. That was like I don't know if that was a low point in trying to get social media followers. But my LinkedIn businesswomen friends were like, post it. So I did. So it was the Nora Roberts. She has that analogy. She was asked about juggling, and you think about the balls that you have in your hands, and some of them are glass and some are plastic. And you got to think about which ones you can't drop and which ones you can. And so there are definitely some things that I'm just like, totally drop the ball on that one, but it's okay. Whoever it is going to understand. I mean, it's not to the point of being disrespectful. I think on some level, you got to remember, yes, we all need to give ourselves a break, but there are other people who we should be valuing and respecting too. So it's not a license to just treat people with disrespect, but I think learning to say no.
Yes. So important.
Knowing that the iPad's going to babysit a little bit more than you would have preferred, prioritizing a little bit more, just making sure that you get that time with your family, figuring out what can wait. Like I have a task list that I do, and some of the stuff's like important. And some of it's like, okay, if somebody doesn't hear this from me in a week, it's no big deal because they don't expect it. Just figuring that out. And then I am fortunate to have family in town who have been helpful when they could. We didn't see my parents for a while at the beginning of COVID because we didn't want to get them sick, but that's been helpful when we need some extra help too. So I don't think there's really a real balance. There's no magic secret. It's just, we're never going to get it totally right. Our kids are going to end up in therapy one way or another, just doing the best that we can. I think if I wake up and I say, okay, this is like my capacity for today, but I'm also going to take care of myself and do the things like exercise for me is huge. When I get that exercise time on my bike, or if I'm doing one of the other workouts, it makes me happier, makes me a better parent, makes me a better employee.
More energy.
Have more energy. I'm more excited. I'm
Yes.
taking care of myself. I'm more positive. So like, you got to kind of find that thing. I try to do my quiet time in the morning. I've been pretty good about that lately too. And, spend some reflection, prayer time, and you just have to make the time.
Great advice. Well, Jennifer, this is called Something Extra. What do you believe is the something extra that every leader needs?
Every leader needs to remember what it was like when they didn't feel like a leader or they weren't perceived as a leader. It is so easy to do the whole I walked both ways uphill barefoot in the snow to school mentality. I suffered, so should you. I think we do a huge disservice to people when we have that mentality instead of saying like, listen, I had it rough. I know what it was like to do that. And I want to make it better for you. I want to encourage you. I want to help you. And so I think when somebody is a leader, just remembering that is going to go so much further than you being like the best at gathering assets or having the most sales or something like that. But I hope that I never, ever, ever forget how hard that time was. I don't want to be remembered again by having to do it again. I never want to forget. My husband and I are 100% dedicated to helping anybody who's like needs a job. If I know somebody, if I can network for them, anything, I don't ever want to forget. And I hope all leaders, never forget that.
Ooh, that's so good. But tell me, what's the exciting thing that's coming up for you? Anything you want to talk about? How can our listeners get involved? Tell our listeners about it.
A couple things. I've been, as you mentioned, doing a lot more social media. So I always feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Jennifer Belmont Jennings, and I'm at money.t, like the drink, .legacy on Instagram, where I do a little more fluff with my important stuff, like tag the designer of my blazer, because people like that on Instagram. So I'm really trying to do that and build up like this wealthy women. I try to do a video every week if I can. And then I'm also excited because I'm contributing a chapter to a book right now written by a bunch of women lawyers for young women lawyers going into law school or early in their career, just about a lot of what we talked about today, which is it doesn't all look the same for everybody. And I'm very excited about that. That's something that never would have happened, but for, to use the legal jargon, all of that other stuff in the background. The boards that I'm on now, none of that would have happened if I hadn't gone down that previous path. So I'm very excited about that. Hopefully it will help people. And I'm excited just about the social media and events and things I'm doing just to get women excited about being involved in this important topic.
Well, I tell you what, you are such a fun person and just such a valuable person to have in your tribe. So I know I appreciate you, Jennifer, and I hope that a lot of people will reach out to you, connect with Jennifer. She just is a lot of fun, very intelligent, and I know that you'll enjoy getting to know her. So I hope you do have a lot of people reach out. But thanks again, Jennifer, for making the time today. This has been so much fun. I really do appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you too.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc., 2019. For show notes or to reach Lisa, visit tpi.co/podcast. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you listen.